Alrighty, welcome everybody. My name is Can and I am here with Lyngso and I have two co-hosts today, Maddie and
Hey.
Richard. They're gonna be shadowing me today because this is my last class that I'm hosting before I go away for a little bit. I'll be back later this year. So Maddie, you'll see her face from now on in all these classes and hopefully Richard too. And today we have Lisa and Kathleen Putnam from the Master Gardeners, and we're going to be talking about spring and summer veggies. As always, go ahead and type your questions in via chat, and we'll go ahead and address them. And both Lisa and Kathleen will throw some questions for you in the beginning, and you can send that in to ask questions here, so that way we receive it in the correct chat. So without further ado, let's get the class started. Oh, and by the way, this class is being recorded and will be available under Lyngso's community resources page. So look for that tomorrow. Other than that, let's welcome Lisa and Kathleen. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Can. So just by way of introduction, the first few slides are going to be, I have a small farm in Woodside. And so we'll talk a little bit about what our practices are there. We're doing regenerative ag there. And then I have a home garden in Portola Valley. And Kathleen has, well, she's a professional vegetable gardener and an ISA certified arborist. And she has clients in Woodside, Boulder Creek, and then she lives in Santa Cruz. So we cover a fairly big geographical area, but if in chat or in chat, if you want to put where you're from, Can will just call off a few of those names and we'll have a better idea. The talk is more geared towards Central Peninsula in the Bay Area. But anyway, without further ado, that is Mission Farm in Woodside, and we will go into regenerative ag. And thank you for coming. I know a lot of people are zoomed out after 5 years of Zooming, but we appreciate you guys being here. So, so actually, this little farm is where I used to live, and so from 2007 to 2017, I was farming there with my kids, and we had a little farm stand on on most weekends. But in May 2022, so about 2.5 years ago, it wasn't farmed from 2017 to 2022. So we started with a blank slate pretty much. So you can see on the left-hand side, it's just rows. We're doing in-ground farming. We don't do it in raised beds. And within 3 months, so from May to August, it's just amazing to me how generous Mother Nature is and how quickly things grow. And I mean, you can see those tomatoes, which were planted in May, in the back of the right-hand screen of, 6-foot tall tomatoes just within a couple of months. So anyway, just always incredible to me how quickly things go. Started with a group of farmers, and it was just like 3 or 4 of us to begin with. And it's probably about 2 acres under cultivation, probably 1 acre in vegetables and 1 acre in fruit trees. So we were working hard and it was super, super fun. We'll get into, Kathleen will do some information about cover cropping and keeping your soil covered, but you can see in the left-hand side, one of the first things we did is we put mulch over all the rows so we didn't have bare soil, which is one of the principles of regenerative agriculture. Moving on. So yeah, you can see in August, that's me standing up. I'm about 5'3" on the left-hand side. You can see the corn is probably 8 feet tall, and that's just from planting in seed in May. And same with the tomatoes. That tomato in the middle looks pretty funny. We took off some of the bottom leaves. We were just trying to get some some of those tomatoes to ripen up before we took them out at the end of the season in October, and planted out our brassicas. So I'll go through these a little bit quickly, so we can.
Lisa, do you want to know where folks are from?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so we have a lot of folks from San Francisco, Belmont, San Mateo, Menlo Park, Pacifica, La Honda, El Granada, Milpitas, Arizona, Hillsborough, Portola Valley,
New Jersey.
New Jersey,
All right.
Wow.
Yeah,
Los Angeles.
yeah.
Oh, LA. Okay, great. Well, the ones local, most of this is going to be, the timing and stuff is going to be for Mid-Peninsula, like Arizona and stuff, and LA. You guys don't get the same frost we do. And so timing, you can probably get your, we don't get tomatoes in here till April 15th to about May 15th, but you can probably get your tomatoes in a little earlier than that. But anyway, that's exciting. Thank you for joining us from all over the place.
And I lived and gardened in San Francisco in the Sunset for 30 years. And the planting dates that Lisa's going to give apply just as well to San Francisco as the Mid-Peninsula.
Oh, that's good to know. And you use them out in Santa Cruz too, Kathleen?
Yeah, pretty much the same climate. I mean, San Francisco was colder.
Yeah.
Certain stuff I couldn't grow, but the planting dates were the same.
Okay. Okay, great. So we do, and we'll get into this a little, so this is a little overview before we get into the meat of things, but we do something called chop and drop. So we don't pull the weeds out. We chop them at soil level, and we just chop them into little pieces and let them fall to the ground, and then they act as mulch. Now I will say that's the premium, you know, if you've got time and if you've got patience, you know, just chop your weeds instead of pulling them, because those roots will decompose and put little airways into your soil. So they'll add oxygen, they'll add organic matter. It's the cheapest, easiest organic matter to your soil, is just leave those roots in place and feed your microbes. That being said, we're kind of a production farm. And so sometimes it's just like mallow right now, popweed. There are certain things. I have so much calendula, and calendula is just taking over the farm. So there are some things we pull. It's just the way it is. So there's
But
the
never pull field bindweed.
yeah.
Just put it off at soil level.
Yeah, so field bindweed in the morning glory family, it's actually pretty, with kind of a heart-shaped leaved and a pretty little flower. Right now, it won't have any flowers or anything, but always chop that off at soil level. If you pull it, you're just going to have a huge mat of field bindweed. But I just don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good, which means, you know, if you're walking by and you don't have your clippers with you and you see mallow, just go ahead and pull it. I mean, it's not, but if you have your clippers, then go ahead and chop and drop. So, and we can get into that a little more later. We planted in October, so about 2.5 years ago, we planted a hedgerow of California natives because Filoli was having a big sale on all their California natives. And Kathleen, you just saw them the other day.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
I mean, they're just doing great. The yarrow can kind of take over, and it has, but when it gets into the rows, we just dig it out and place it somewhere else. But we put manzanita in, we put a bunch of salvias, we put sticky monkey flower, and it really looks great. It's you can see one of our gardeners, Dion, planting there. Now that's completely covered with a real, and you do hedgerows to bring in beneficial insects, and just to help the California, you know, just help the California insects, which are going to help the California vertebrates. So it's, I don't know if many of you, if you haven't read the book by Doug Tallamy, Nature's Best Hope, I would highly recommend it. It's a great book, how we can all, if we all put natives into our garden, how we can help bring back nature and provide
And-
habitat.
To keep my mallow in control, I mow it with my electric mower.
Oh, you do?
It's kind of like summer pruning your fruit trees.
Yeah.
You take away some of the photosynthesis power of the plant and it contains it much better.
So mallow, not
I
Achillea.
mean, yarrow,
Yarrow.
Achillea.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a good idea. I love yarrow.
And I'm lazy.
So today we're going to cover from seed to seedling and planting out and harvesting. I have really tried to love soil blocking, but I've been using these 72 on the far left, these 72 seed trays for about 15 years. And you know what? I can see that I didn't give these guys enough light soon enough, but they turned out just fine. I just get consistent good results with these seed trays. Now for brassicas, I mean, you're doing, even in a small garden, you're doing a lot of brassicas. It's too late for seeding now. You would have had to seed in January because it's a February plant out and you're planting out a 6-week-old seedling. So you will go through a chart, but you just go back 6 weeks from when you can plant something out. But you could go by, right now is the perfect time to put in broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, chard, beets. You can seed beets right now. So it's the perfect time to put in your spring garden. And come April, May, you'll be putting in your summer garden. But you can interplant in, and you want to interplant, actually, we'll get into that, your tomatoes into your broccoli. So you can see the rows that we're planting out, and we're doing the same thing right now. I will say we currently at Mission Farm have a very bad rodent problem. So we have rats and bunnies and squirrels. And so we're just dealing with how to keep the vertebrates down. And it's tricky. So, right, I'm going to keep going because we'll go through. We make our own compost. So for 17 years that Mission Farm has been going, we have never put in an outside input. So we've never added any fertilizer, never added blood meal, bone meal, alfalfa meal. But we make our own compost on site, and we, between each crop, so about 3 times a year, we're putting a little bit of compost on each row. And now our nutrients are cycling so well that we probably wouldn't even have to add any more compost, but I'm putting a dusting of compost. I'd say maybe 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. And that's just to keep feeding those microbes. But our nutrient cycling is going really, really well. So, and we grow a lot of produce. So this is a summer harvest because I see the apricots and, but the nice thing about broccoli that you plant right now, your February planted broccoli, February, March, that broccoli is going to keep going until October, November. So you're going to get your central head, and then you're going to get a whole bunch of side sprouts. So I'm not surprised to see broccoli. When I'm picking tomatoes, I'm still harvesting broccoli.
What variety?
That's Marathon, but right now I'm doing a test with Thompson, Bellstar, and Gypsy. And your quote unquote fall planted broccoli, so your August, September planted broccoli, you're going to get 1 central head. After you do that central head, you might get 1 harvest of side sprouts, and then it goes to flower. You just can't keep on top of it. I have written the seed companies asking me that will not go to flower. I think it's called vernalization right away. That'll keep doing side sprouts when it's cold. And so far, I don't think there is a variety that does that. So anyway, but you can have broccoli. I guess I just really emphasize, put some broccoli in now. And you'll have broccoli for months to come. You'll have broccoli for the next 10 months. And it's really nice. And I like Marathon. I like Gypsy. Kathleen, do you have some favorites?
No, not especially.
Okay.
I'm planting Marathon at all my clients right now, just because I know it'll keep going into summer.
Yeah, I think Marathon's a really good one. And it's pretty easy to find in the nurseries. So,
Yeah.
okay, that's kind of the recap. And now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of things. And Kathleen, I'll probably have you do cover cropping and principles of regenerative egg.
Okay.
But Kathleen and I were just talking the other day about where to put your vegetable bed, because she does have several clients, and when I'll say it this way: talk to somebody before you put your vegetable bed in, if you can. Because what we find all the time is people bring us in to care for their vegetables after they've already put their vegetable garden in. And inevitably, they've put it in a place that's either very inconvenient or doesn't have enough sun. And you need a minimum of 6 hours of pure sun. That's not dappled. That's just, if you're standing outside the sun, you have to squint. The sun is strong. It's better if you have 8 hours. It's better if you have 12 hours. The more sun, the better. That's how, we all know this from, I think it's 5th grade photosynthesis. That's how plants feed themselves, is through sun, and storing those carbohydrates. Go ahead.
For anyone on the coast, fog does not count as shade. Fog is still sun. So a foggy day, your plants are still photosynthesizing and they're still producing. Shade is a building or a structure or a tree where the sunlight actually is not hitting the leaves.
Yeah, and that's a good clarification. So anyway, you really only need 3 things to be for the plants to be successful, and that's sun, living soil, and we'll get into living soil later. But I will say it's very helpful if you have a few more things, and that's patience, curiosity, and the power of observation. That's what's down in the little left-hand corner. Patience is the little heart, and curiosity is the detective, and the power of observation. And I mean, I guess I say that a little bit tongue in cheek, but the first few years of the garden, we didn't have a drip system in, so I had to hand water everything. And I will say, you develop a relationship. These are just annuals, they're not perennials, but you still develop a relationship with these plants. And when you're watching them every day and you're seeing, okay, I wonder why that leaf is yellow. I wonder why there's some aphids on that leaf. I wonder, look at the water is beating up on all of my brassicas, all the cabbage family. But my tomato, when the water gets on that leaf, it just stays there and it doesn't go anywhere. It's just, so much of this is observation and learning. And I think it's John Jevons, he's the biodynamic farmer. He said it takes 10 years to become a good gardener. And I think that's really true. It just takes time, because you really have to be watching and paying attention. Anything to add, Kathleen?
Well, I mean, I agree. It takes a long time to become a good gardener, but it also takes, like you said, observation and curiosity, because you can do the same damn thing for 10 years and you're not a better gardener for it.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Okay, so we've talked about you need a lot of sun. Now, where to garden? Do you garden in raised beds or garden in the ground? And on the left is my house in Portola Valley, and I decided to garden in raised beds here. Usually raised beds are more, you can control it more. from gophers, rats, bunnies, all sorts of things. And it's kind of hard to see, but I have 4 raised beds up front, and then I have 2 raised beds in the back, and you can see the raised beds in the back have a cover over them, and that's 1/4-inch chicken wire, and that's to keep out rats. And it's a little bit easier sometimes on people's backs if you have raised beds. Raised beds are expensive. They're expensive to put in. You can't use pressure treated wood because that has a bunch of chemicals that leach into your soil. You can certainly get the soil food web going, but raised beds are a little tricky. They the microbes use up a lot of the carbon, and you have to be adding a lot of carbon to it. So to get your soil right in a raised bed is a little tricky. In the ground, it kind of does it for you. So on the right-hand side, you don't have to worry about that. You just add your compost and you kind of, away you go. And that's from a long time. That picture is probably from 2007 or something. But go ahead.
Raised beds, it's very difficult if you're doing it for gophers. So you put gopher wire on the bottom of your raised bed. It's almost impossible to get a good soil interface. So you're going to have drainage issues eventually.
Yeah. So what we did with these raised beds is when we put in the soil, we mixed it up with the soil that was there, so you don't get the water going down and then hitting your native soil. And like Kathleen says, saturating the bed, bringing your water level up in the bed. But it is hard to do. And the gopher wire does go on the bottom, and then it goes up probably about a foot on either side inside of those. So it's more controlled, but it's trickier in some ways. Okay,
And
Kathleen.
you lose a lot of space. You would have twice or maybe even 3 times as much space to garden if you were doing that in the ground.
Yeah, I will say so. And this picture was taken a couple years ago. These raised beds in the back, I took them out, and now I just have it in the ground. For me personally, I prefer in the ground, but I know that is a personal choice. But I took raised beds out, which is kind of funny after building them, but I just get better results in the ground, and they're just not as tricky. I'm going to have you talk about the soil food web, Kathleen.
Okay, so the soil food web is something that Elaine Ingham, I don't know that she invented it, but she observed it, that as the roots, so the sun hits the plants photosynthesize, and all that energy goes into the roots. And some of that energy, actually 30 to 60%, the plant uses to feed the soil, the microbes in the soil, which is a huge number. And so you have to think to yourself, why would a plant give away that much energy? Well, they do it because the organisms in the soil bring to that plant what it needs through hormones and different chemical signaling. The plant lets the microbes know what it needs. They go and get it. And the plant says, thank you, here's some sugar. And so it's a cycle, and it's a web, and everybody eats everybody, and they die, and somebody eats them, and they poop, and somebody eats that. And it just works if you don't mess with it. How's that?
No, I think that's really good. Yeah, it's when you start getting good nutrient cycling in your system, and that's all this is nutrient cycling. Some people might call it a nitrogen cycle. And after you get that going and it's really robust, I will say you will have a super healthy plant. And once you have a super healthy plant, the plant's going to take care of itself. So I will say we don't have pest pressure from insects. You know, our brassicas at the end of the season are going to get aphids, but that's because they're about to die and they're giving off a pheromone saying, we're about to die, come eat us. And then aphids will come in. But during our growing season, we really just don't have a big problem with insects. Now we do have a big problem with vertebrates. We do have a problem with rats and things like that. And that doesn't really have much to do with the soil food web. But when I see there is something going wrong, last year with my tomatoes, there was something going wrong. I was like, oh my God, do I have verticillium? You know, but my first thought is, what's wrong with my soil? What's wrong with my watering? And it's as long as you're not screwing up your system with a bunch of inputs, the system's going to take care of itself, and the system's going to nutrient cycle. How to feed? You want to go into how to feed the soil food web, Kathleen?
Yeah, so you just grow as many plants as you can, always have roots in the ground, in the pathways, always have mulch, don't have bare soil, and don't disturb the soil, or disturb it as little as possible. I don't know if you guys know what a hula hoe is, but it's a super easy way to weed. It just scrapes the top of the soil. It's like a straight bar and then a loop on a handle, and you just go back and forth with it, and it just cuts the roots off at soil level. Bam, you're done. Super easy. And if you're in raised beds, use Lyngso's veggie blend. Lyngso is not paying us to say that, but I had a client in Woodside that luckily contacted me before she even started her vegetable garden. So we put it in full sun. We built the beds, we filled it with Lyngso's veggie blend. And that summer she complained to me that she had too much produce. So, I mean, if you want too much produce, and you know, maybe you're a kind person and you would share that, but you know, Lyngso's does a lot of research on what they put into their mixes, and their veggie blend is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the main thing here is you keep your soil covered.
Yeah.
All the time. It's either covered with cover crops or it's covered with mulch. And I put the little thing in, you wouldn't go out naked. Don't let your soil be naked. So, all right, moving on. Why we feed the web. I think we've kind of gone through this.
Yeah. You want organic matter to feed your soil organisms, which help create aggregates because of the exudates and the globulin, I think is how you call it, which increases your water holding capacity, your water infiltration, which also, if you have good water infiltration, you have good percolation, which recharges the water table, and our state doesn't start sinking. And you have good soil structure.
Yeah. So those are all the reasons why we feed the web. So in our minds, I know Kathleen and I think alike in this, we never think about feeding the plant. Like that never even occurs to me to feed the plant. All I'm ever thinking about is how to feed my soil, how to keep my soil healthy, what's going on with my soil. And luckily, because we've been having very good soil practices for a long, long time, I did a soil test this past June, and my soil is really nice. I have my nutrients. I have everything I need. And it always reminds me of Kathleen, one of Kathleen's teachers up at City College in San Francisco, Gus, who he doesn't bother with soil tests and all that. He just says, look at your plants. You know, are your plants happy? Are they healthy? Then your soil, you know, you're doing something right. And so I think that's as good of a test as anything.
Yeah.
These are the principles of regenerative ag. And Kathleen and I are big fans of Gabe Brown in North Dakota. Now, his farm is 5,000 acres. But my own personal passion project is taking regenerative ag, which is done on huge pieces of property, and having people do it in their backyards. And I think that's completely possible. Do you want to go into the 5 principles of regenerative ag, Kathleen?
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, we've already said disturb your soil as little as possible. And I know Lisa has a fit when people step on her soil. You know, don't try to step on your soil, but if you do, don't, you're not gonna have, it's not gonna kill everything in your soil. So if on occasion you have to step on it, that's fine. Don't worry that much about it. I'm not as worried about that as Lisa is. Whenever you can have roots in the ground, have roots in the ground. Christine Jones, who Lisa has listed further down, says if you cover crop, which you probably do have a slide, you just want to grow as many different plants as possible. It's just like your own diet, right? You want to eat the rainbow. Well, you also want to grow the rainbow. So you want to grow as many different plants in different families as possible. So you don't want to do 3 different kinds of broccoli and 3 different kinds of cauliflower and 3 different kinds of kale, because that's all the same family. But the more different families, that's what awkward. The different families all exudate different things. So you're going to increase your microorganism population, and you're going to get like this living soil that's just, I mean, you put your nose in it and it's just the most amazing thing in the world.
It's
So
beautiful.
if you're not growing a crop, then cover crop or intercrop. And Gabe Brown is a farmer, so he has animals on his land. I think for most urban, suburban gardeners, it's difficult to incorporate animals, but chopping and dropping kind of does the same thing. It stresses the plant. It makes the plant work harder and send out more exudates. And so just chop and drop if you can't have animals.
Okay, sounds good. We have kind of covered this, the benefits of cover cropping.
Yeah.
So I'll just reiterate. So Kathleen does a whole class on cover cropping, and you can look at Lyngso to if you're curious about it, and I hope you are. But it's instead of putting mulch like straw, cover cropping is just putting a whole bunch, as Kathleen just said, a whole bunch of different families. And I just throw out California wildflower seeds. Usually I'm cover cropping a lot with California wildflowers these days, but you just want a variety of different things in your cover crop, and it's roots in the ground, not boots on the ground. That's my that's my saying. And we've already talked about the benefits of that, so we won't.
And one more benefit that I have been saying for several years now is it is one of the solutions to climate change, because plants pull carbon out of the air and put it into the soil in a stable state. And the more research I do, the more other soil scientists are coming to the same conclusion. So it really is important to have as many plants pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into a stable form in the ground where it used to be before we started tilling.
Yeah. So we're obviously no-till gardeners. So the different families, so Kathleen and I have taken quite a few seminars from Christine Jones, who's a soil scientist in Australia, who's now retired, but she doesn't put any legumes in her cover cropping mix. She'll put some annual grasses, arugula, the things listed there: buckwheat, radish, turnips, mustard. Yeah, I mean, I do have clover in there, which is a legume. But what we see a lot, people mix up cover cropping with just throwing out a whole bunch of fava beans or bell beans, and that's because they think, oh, that's capturing so much nitrogen from the air and storing it in the roots. And it's fine to have 1 or maybe 2 legumes in there, but you don't want to, I just finished reading Ellen Outhouse's book about ecological gardening. We as human beings, we just want to chase nitrogen, and we just want more nitrogen, nitrogen's good. So, it's like garlic or something, oh, if some nitrogen is good, then a ton of nitrogen must be better. Well, that's not necessarily true. You want to keep things in balance, and you don't want to get your soil so it's so high in nitrogen. It needs to be within a certain range. So I would just highly encourage, instead of people who just think, oh yeah, great, I'm going to cover crop, I'm going to plant all these fava beans or plant all these bell beans or vetch or clover. You're not doing your soil any favor. You're doing a soil favor when you plant a whole bunch of different families, and that's what's keeping that soil healthy.
And Christine Jones, the last talk we went to, she said have at least 8 plant families.
Yeah, which is hard to do, but like I just do it now with
mixes. You just buy mixes, like native mixes, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I just buy it from Nature's Seed, and they're in Utah, and I just buy the California wildflower mix, and that's what I use. And then it's also really pretty, so you get an added benefit of that. Okay, we're going to get back into gardening and not talk so much about cover cropping and principles of regenerative ag. But Kathleen, you want to talk about watering?
Yeah, so I used to work at a retail nursery, and one of the biggest questions I would always get is, why is my plant yellow? And my first question would be, how often are you watering it? And they would always say, well, it's on a drip system. In fact, Lisa and I just had a client who said that. Well, that's not an answer. That doesn't tell me how often and for how long you're watering. So even if you have a drip system, and we get asked a lot, how, what should I set my timer to? Well, it depends. Do you have clay soil? Do you have sandy soil? Do you have, beautiful loam soil? So drip is what my Boulder Creek client, it's all hose bib drip, which is a timer, a filter, and then you connect your drip system to that. It's easy to install. You can go on Urban Farmer's website. They have a diagram of all the parts you need. And I did just find out why they do a closed loop system. I was looking into it, and the literature on drip irrigation, most of it is from the 90s. And that was before we had a pressure regulated inline emitter line. And so you had to have a closed system or you lost pressure as the water ran through the system. So they closed the system. So it was, can you use your arrow, Lisa, and show where the very end is? Yeah, and then the other end. So that would all be attached. So the water just recycled within that system, and the pressure stayed the same within that system. That's no longer necessary. So now you can have an open end system. You just put a goof plug in your 1/4 inch inline emitter, and it makes it so much easier when you're adding compost and mulch, is you can just move those lines. If it's a loop, it's almost impossible to move those lines. Water in the morning if possible, but if you see a plant that's struggling, water it. Well, I shouldn't say, if you see a plant that's struggling, stick your finger in the ground. And if the ground is wet, don't water it. You're probably overwatering, because the signs are almost identical for overwatering and underwatering. So then don't water. But if you stick your finger in the ground and it's dry, water it, and check your soil moisture often.
Yeah. And as Kathleen just said, the best way to check your soil moisture is really just your finger. I mean, some people, if you're like an engineer or a gadget person, you can get moisture monitors, but it's not necessary. You can just put your soil knife in and go down a few inches and see if it's wet or if it's dry.
Yeah. And most of those soil monitors, unless you're going to buy a $500 one from an agricultural store. I mean, I know where I used to work, I took one out of its package, put the battery in, and it was a pH and a water meter, and I stuck it in a lemon, and it registered like 1, which, I mean, that's ridiculous. So you get what you pay for it. I think it was $20. So, I mean, if you're super into, you know, spending that kind of money, then you're going to spend like 500 or more to get an accurate meter, whereas your finger's free. And it's really good to know how moist your soil is. And to actually, you stick your finger in or your soil knife, pull it back a little bit, and you're down there on the ground and you're looking. And that's one of the most important things you can do.
Yeah, I was just going to say that when you're poking around in your soil with your finger, you're looking at things. You're looking at your soil. You're looking at the structure of the soil. You're looking, do you have aggregates? And so it's worth it just because of the observational value.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're kind of covering the when, where, why, what of gardening. So I'll go over. I do think of gardening in 3 seasons, and the whole farm kind of takes December and January off, other than seeding. We do seeding in January for all of our brassicas, but you're planting your spring crops now. So your spring crops are everything in the brassica family, which is your broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, kohlrabi, all your cole crops. Your
lettuce, spinach.
Yeah, lettuce is a little bit, February, March. And then the whole family, it used to be called Chinapotese. It's now called Amaranthaceae, but spinach, beets, chard, all of that can go in now. So it's kind of now in March, you're getting all of those crops in, and go for it. Do it. Go today. It's too late to start seeds for those things, but go ahead and go to your local nursery and put those in. Your timing is perfect. It's sunny today here. I mean, it might have been better right before the rains, but and I'll just throw this out there. I took a class. This was funny. It was by Nancy Garrison on drought farming, and this is a long time ago. And basically her whole class was plant a winter garden, have things growing in November, December, January, February, April, May, use our rains. We turned our irrigation off in October, and we probably won't turn it back on until May, maybe April. So use these months where the water's free, and so get your crops in, get them growing. If it's going to be sunny now for a little while, I haven't looked at the weather report. It actually rained this morning here in the but now it's going to be sunny at least for the next 10 days. So if you're going to put those crops in, you're going to have to go ahead and water them in, and then you might actually have to give them a little bit of supplemental water till the rains come back. But anyway, use what is given to us. So that's spring gardening. Planting for summer, I plant that April, May, June. I usually plant my tomatoes April 15th, that's in Woodside and Portola Valley. Kathleen, how about you?
Yeah, about that. I mean, my deadline is, if I don't have them in by Mother's Day, I'm screwed.
Okay.
So I can go like the first week of May, and I've never had a problem.
Yeah, so late April, early May. We've tried, and a lot of people still do this. They get their tomatoes in February or March, and then they have to put a wall of water around them. They have to put frost protection over them. And for where we're at, but we get frost, it doesn't make any sense. I know for me, my first tomato is going to be July 15th. It doesn't matter when that tomato goes in the ground. That's going to be my first harvestable tomato. Now, where it's more temperate, like Redwood City, as you get closer to the bay, you don't have as much frost as I get. So you might be able to sneak them in a little earlier, but really mid-April is your is your date, because you're looking for sunlight hours too. You're not just looking for nighttime temperatures.
Yeah, I was gonna say, even in Arizona, you need so many hours of sunlight before those plants can start growing, take off and start growing.
Yeah.
So even if it's warm where you are now, if you only have, I don't know, 8 hours of sunlight right now, you're probably not gonna, you probably should wait until April. Even you could probably sneak it in the beginning of April, but it's daylight hours and sunlight on those leaves that really dictates how that tomato's gonna do.
Yeah, yeah. And then we'll just go into the fall planted, which is really August, September planted. You can see the inherent conflict here that you can plant a broccoli in February. Like right now, our broccoli that I'm planting right now, I know that broccoli is going to be producing well until October. So I need to plant my tomatoes and there's another reason to do it. We'll get into later, but I need to plant my tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and zucchini and beans. I need to get all that in April, May. Well, my garden's still full of my broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage. And so I do interplant. And if I have to, I will take out a broccoli or two to put in a tomato. And so things have to share. And then those tomatoes are going to go all the way till, for me, they're going to keep producing till about October. And your broccoli is going to be producing till October. And you need to get your fall crop in August for your winter crops. So there's always this push me, pull you of space. And I do a lot of interplanting. Almost all, you can kind of see from the photo there. I interplant my cover crops. I interplant my veggies, and we just kind of make room. We make room for things. I mean, but I always have things blooming, and that's the beauty and the curse of being in California is we can grow year round. If we were in the middle of North Dakota and we're under 6 feet of snow, we can't be doing any of this. So I guess we can just count ourselves lucky that we have this problem of not enough space and having to kind of sneak things in. Anything to add on that, Kathleen?
Well, it depends on how much production you want. I mean, I have like my Boulder Creek client, we have more space than we can use.
Yeah.
I keep a third of her beds in cover crop all the time.
Yeah.
Then I just rotate through because I don't want to grow tomatoes in the same place every year. I want to do a 3-year rotation on them.
Yeah.
So luckily, and it depends on how much you want. And like San Francisco, how many tomatoes can you grow? I mean, there's like 2 or 3 varieties that do well. So just, you kind of have to decide what's most important to you that you grow. Like Lisa grows corn. I mean, that's great. I've never grown corn. It's not something I want to take up that much room and put that much into for 1 ear of corn. So you just kind of have to make decisions. What is it you really want? Like if you love peppers, then plant more, you know what I mean? Just plant more of what you want and you'll figure it out.
Yeah. I should add to all of that, peppers. So if you're going to seed your things that are going to be going in, let's call it April 15th, all your summer stuff, go ahead and seed those now. Peppers, you're already a little late because peppers take such a long time. As a matter of fact, let me just go to the chart. So when to start what? And let me take peppers. So you can see right here where my arrow is, peppers. How to read this chart is if you go to the far right of the chart, it says from seed to transplant, and you go to peppers and it says 8 weeks. And I put my peppers in April. You could put it in May. But you really then, you're going to be wanting to seed those peppers more like January. Right now, I've already seeded my tomatoes. It was a little early. It's because I'm going out of town. I usually seed my tomatoes into February, but I went ahead and seeded them now. And they will be going in. So that's where's tomatoes? There's tomatoes. So that's 6 weeks. I know I want to put them in April 15th. So I just subtract 6 weeks from April 15th. That brings me to the end of February. And that's when I want to be seeding my tomatoes for an April 15th plant out. This chart, by the way, it's right next to me, which is kind of funny. I color coded this chart a long time ago. I look at this chart. I've been gardening a long time. I became a master gardener in 1999. I look at this chart, I swear to God, almost every single day. And that's why it's right next to my desk. And I color coded it and put it on heavy stock. But if you don't want to do all of that, just go to UC Master Gardener, Santa Clara County, and click on vegetable planting chart. And this will come up and you can print it out if you want. I
And
like,
even though it's from Santa Clara County, Master Gardeners, it applies to the whole greater Bay Area, Santa Cruz. I mean, it's San Francisco down to Santa Cruz, even probably even Monterey. I think this chart is valid. Marin, Sonoma, it's a great chart.
yeah. And I will say, so I start things from seed because I need thousands of, we seeded 1,400. Anyway, we seed about 2,000 brassicas. Well, if I were to go buy those at a nursery, it would be like $2,000 because a little 6-pack of brassicas is about $6, $5.99. So they're about $1 each. So that's why I kind of live by the sword, die by the sword. That's why I use this chart so much. But what you can do is just go to your local nursery and buy some, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale right now. And I wouldn't buy them now. And Master Gardeners has a big, their tomato sale, and we have a slide on that in April. And luckily we sell them right at the exact right time for you to go ahead and buy them and bring them home and plant them. So if you're not going to do seeding, great, then just go buy some seedlings. But this will just tell you, just ignore that line there and just say, oh, what can I be planting now? Oh, it's February. I can do arugula. I can do asparagus crowns. I can do beets. I can do bok choy. I can do broccoli. I can do cabbage. And so it just,
I was going to say, if you just have a small backyard garden, I don't start seeds. I just go to the nursery. I get a discount. It's actually like $3 a 6-pack. And, I'm going to go buy 2 6-packs tomorrow. Well, to go buy a pack of seeds and the soil and the containers, I'm going to end up investing more than it would be for me to just go buy a 6-pack. Plus, I'm going to have a ton of seeds left over.
Yeah.
Because when you buy a seed pack, it's not 12 seeds. It's probably a couple hundred seeds. So if you're just a backyard grower growing for yourself, it's pretty good. It's pretty easy to just go to a good nursery and buy a 6-pack.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I mean, the only thing I would say in favor of seeding is the variety. There's probably 200 different kinds of broccoli. There's probably tomatoes, God only knows. There's hundreds of different kinds of tomatoes. Tomatoes have become pretty easy to find interesting varieties at nurseries. It used to not be that way. It used to be, you could buy a beefsteak, you could buy, but now you can buy San Marzino, you can buy all sorts of different kinds of tomatoes and peppers. So it's not as critical anymore. But if you feel like seeding, it's fun. We make our own seed starting. We don't buy anything. So we just take our compost, we put it through a 1/2-inch screen, then we put it through a 1/4-inch screen. Then we add some quarter-minus fir or some ligna peat, and then we add some perlite. So those those we do purchase. Before I was doing that, I was just doing vermiculite, perlite, and compost, 25%, 25%, 50%. And I've always, knock on wood, I've always had good luck with it's a soilless mix, but I've always had good luck with it.
There is something magical about seeds.
Oh, they're so fun. Yeah. I mean, and that's part of it too, is I love seeding. Actually, it's one of my favorite activities in the garden. So, okay, well, that's enough about that. This is one of my favorite slides. We haven't talked about rotating crops yet, but really you shouldn't grow tomatoes in the same place year after year. We do a 3-year crop rotation. So this year it's our 3rd year. So we're going back to where we had tomatoes 3 years ago. And then that's true of anything in the tomato family, which are potatoes, eggplant, peppers, tomatillos. Same with cucurbits, and your corn is a grass, your grass family, your brassicas.
And why do you rotate?
Well, there's lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is, for instance, on this family, on your Amaranthaceae family, you're going to get a little leaf miner that goes between the 2 layers of the leaves. He's actually inside the leaves, and he gets bigger and bigger, and it's actually super, super cool. But then they drop down and they pupate in the soil, but they're only going to affect that family. So if you keep if your rotation is beets and then chard and then spinach, you're not doing yourself any favors, because you're just planting the same family over and over again. So you want to break that cycle, and you'd want to put, brassicas in that cycle. And also different plants have different exudates. So you're bringing in different microorganisms. That just goes back to your variety of things.
Can I talk about broccoli now, or is that coming up?
Yeah, no, why don't you talk about it now?
Okay, so the UC Davis has done some research on verticillium wilt, which is something that the Soliaceae family gets. But a lot of backyards only have one spot that gets enough sun to grow their tomatoes well, which I have clients where I have this situation. So UC Davis has found out that broccoli actually exudates some chemical that kills verticillium, because all soil has verticillium in it. It's just not to the levels that it's going to infect your plant. But if you plant broccoli now, you could plant tomatoes where they are now, and you will not get verticillium. So if you have to plant your tomatoes in only one spot because it's the sunniest, warmest spot in your yard, plant broccoli when your tomatoes aren't in it.
Yeah, good. And I mean, that doesn't guarantee you're not going to get verticillium.
Oh, but it helps.
But it helps. It reduces the verticillium load in your soil.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is a great slide. You'll get the presentation. Can will send it out to you. How to plant, tools and techniques. People
I have on my work pants right now.
Yeah.
Here's this.
And you've got your soil knife. Oh, you've got your
I got my sharpener. I always have my sharpener
yeah
with me at all times.
Yeah. So gardening does not need to be expensive. I mean, these are all the tools that I have. I have ARS pruners, which granted they were like $67 or something. And then I have a soil knife, I have my sharpener, and I have my pocket boy. And I don't wear gloves very often, but I do have them in my thing. But you don't need a million different tools. It's just like our garden, like I don't use any inputs and other than compost, but I don't buy purchased inputs other than I do buy Sluggo, but I'm trying to use beer traps instead of that. But just my point with all of this is you don't need to go buy a ton of tools. You don't need to go buy a bunch of fertilizer, organic or otherwise. It does not need to be an expensive sport. You don't have to do raised beds. You could do it in the ground. Now you can make it as expensive as you want, but there's also a way to do it where it's not very expensive. So
And at the last talk Lisa and I went to with Christine Jones, the Australian soil scientist, I asked her, is there a difference to the soil if you use organic nitrogen or chemical nitrogen? And she said, no, it makes no difference. It's gonna mess up the balance of your soil. So we don't fertilize. I haven't bought fertilizer in I don't know how long.
yeah. And just to recap what Kathleen just said is to the microbes, extra nitrogen is extra nitrogen. And it doesn't matter if you're getting it through Agent Orange or through blood meal, but you just don't want to mess up the balance. So in that regard, I would say test your soil. Seeding, we kind of covered seeding, and I want to try to keep the talk to as close to an hour so we leave time for Q&A. But if you're growing seeding, if you're growing things from seed, you'd start in January for a plant out in February. But this is when we had our farm stand. Gosh, that has to be 15 years ago or something, because he's now 20 years old. Let's see, where are we?
Oh, buy nice seedlings. Don't buy tall, skinny, looking like they're searching for the sun.
Yeah. And you can just pop them out of the 6-pack, make sure that their roots aren't going around, make sure their roots look healthy, and that they're not root bound. I like Half Moon Bay Nursery, and Kathleen goes to San Lorenzo Nursery in Santa Cruz, which is an excellent nursery.
It's amazing. I'm lucky.
Yeah. How? Oh, okay. Yeah, we've kind of covered some of this, so I'll go through it quickly. But when I'm planting out, I have my little seedlings that I've either purchased or grown at my house. So this is at my house. This isn't at the farm, but I have my big pile of compost, and I just go and I put I take out my last crop, I spread my compost out, I get my little seedlings, I lay them out, and then I just, with my soil knife, it takes me maybe 2 or 3 seconds per seedling, just put my soil knife in, pull it towards me, drop the seedling in, and then you water. And then I do cover, because birds do like this family, the brassica family. Birds do like that family, and so they could come and eat your little seedlings. But that's some big bok choy I've got going there. But that's how we do it. Let's see, protection, bugs, blight, birds. So we just kind of talked about, I'm actually going to go to the next slide just for a second, and then I'll go back to that slide. But this is what we put over our crops to keep the birds from getting our new brassicas. And this is our cat, Zazo. Sadly, Zazo is no longer with us. But anyway, having a cat, I will say, Zazo doesn't have it on here, but I have a bird collar, a little like a clown collar, so my cats don't get any birds, and it really does work. It's amazing how well it works, but they can still get rodents. And so cats really do help with rodents. I'm going to go back to the other slide, and then we can talk about how to protect your crops again. But basically, I don't, as far as insects go, I don't have a big insect problem. I will get aphids at the end of the life of brassicas. Sometimes I think I've had white flies, but Kathleen, I've seen them at clients' house when things are overwatered.
Yeah.
What I would say, if you have anything, my question would not be, oh, how do I get rid of whiteflies or how do I get rid of aphids? That's not the question I'd be asking myself. The question I'd be asking myself would be, if I have whiteflies, I would ask myself, am I overwatering it? You know, is that why I have whiteflies? I'd ask myself if I have aphids, oh, is it the end of the life for my brassica? If I have a pest problem, I'm going to say, what's wrong with my soil, or what's wrong with my watering, or do I have enough sun? And it's not, you give that plant the correct sun, water, and healthy soil, you're just, I can guarantee you, you can believe me on this, you're just not going to have a problem with insects. Now, birds, rats, squirrels, and bunnies is that's a different thing. And slugs, I will say when I cover it so the birds can't get my little brassica seedlings, then what's going to happen? You're going to get slugs because you just eliminated birds. The birds would have come and ate the slugs. So that's just, everything is a balance. And so if you're going to take something out of your ecosystem, you're going to create another problem. So just keep that in mind as you're going through things. So we do put Sluggo out. We've just started experimenting with beer traps. The thing with beer traps, when it rains, you almost have to put like a little umbrella over it or something, because then it just gets full of water and then it's not going to attract the slugs. So I don't like it. It's my only input and I kind of hate using it, but right now our only purchased input is Sluggo.
And with Sluggo, follow the directions. You just sprinkle a little bit. You don't put like a solid layer down of Sluggo, because it's just going to get moldy and become ineffective.
Yeah. And I will say for birds, it doesn't really work for rats and stuff, but I put floating row cover over, or I've started to use a lot more netting. You can buy an agricultural netting. I just go to Joann's Fabrics, which I think is having a hard time financially right now, but
Closing.
yeah, they have netting. They have tulle, which is kind of thin, but then they have something called netting and it's right next to their tulle, and they have it on sale a lot, very often, for $1 a yard. Our rows are all 25 feet long, so I buy like 7.5 yards, so it's $7, and I use it year after year, until it gets so tattered that I can't use it anymore. But those are some options to cover your crops. I like the netting a little bit better because a lot more sun gets through. If you do floating row cover, Agribon is what I use, but be careful of your weight. There's some that let 70% of the sun through, and there's some that only lets 30% of the sun through. So just kind of
Get the lightest one possible.
yeah, get the latest one. Okay, rodents. So this has been the bane of my existence. We do use this for squirrels. We have a heart traps for squirrels and for rats, and we have rat traps, and we have gophers, because I like being in the ground more than I do in raised beds, so we have gophers. This is Brian. He's a school teacher at Woodside Elementary, and he's our gopher guy, and he's teaching us how to set the gopher trap. I don't know what to say. I don't have a great solution. This year, what we're doing is we're covering everything with 1/4-inch hardware cloth, and we've just made like tunnels of it, and but rats, bunnies, and squirrels are hard. I don't know.
Probably most people don't have a problem with bunnies if they're suburban or urban, but definitely rats and squirrels.
Yeah. So, I mean, really what we try to do is exclusion. So we just try to trap, and we try to cover our crops so the rodents can't get to them. So that's that. Harvesting. This is unfortunately for me, my least favorite thing to do.
Me too.
But some people don't mind. And at the farm, we have like 10 volunteers. And so they're always on harvesting. But um, and the only reason I bring this up is because when you're planting out your garden, you have to think, oh, if I'm planting all this means it's going to produce stuff and it means I have to harvest it. So just, I always put 1/3 of your time is in harvesting. That's just, it's time consuming, especially if you love cherry tomatoes. You know, one beefsteak tomato takes the same amount of time as harvesting one cherry tomato. And I will say a cherry tomato has a little kink in the stem where you can just go against the kink and it'll pop right off, and then you can keep the stem on and it'll keep it fresh a little bit longer. But
Everybody ends up with one zucchini or more that are like the size of a baseball bat because you didn't see it underneath all those leaves.
yeah. So there's single serving vegetables, like a cauliflower is a single serving. A beet is a single serving, and some things, obviously kale, you know, all your leafy greens. Don't go and take off the top of the head, take off the rosette, take off the leaves along the bottom, so it'll keep producing. That's true of all leafy greens. Your broccoli, you cut your center head, but then you're going to get side sprouts, especially all your broccoli that's planted now. So with beets, ideally, when you harvest one, you know, let's say you seed 20 beets. When you harvest one, put a new seed in the ground up until a certain point. You can only do that, you know, February, March, April. I'll look on my little thing here. Up until May. No, direct sowing is really just March and April. So, but if you're harvesting, then put another seed in so you get another beet. But anyway, just factor that in when you're planting your garden of how much time it takes to harvest. Weather, drought, and atmospheric rivers. Really, the only thing I think I want to say here is if you have roots in the ground, and so you're cover cropping and you've got your cash crop in, we've had some pretty tremendous atmospheric rivers. We've had some this year, but over the last few years. And I will say my infiltration and percolation, because of the cover cropping and because I always have roots in the soil, I do not have any standing water. It just infiltrates and percolates. And same with drought, as long as you've got roots in the ground, they're acting as a reservoir and they're holding the moisture in the ground. So you water a lot less when you have cover cropped. And people don't believe me.
So
But
it sounds counterintuitive, but it's true.
Yeah. So I can have a row that has nothing in it, no plants in it for whatever reason. I just took everything out of that row, and I can have a row next to it that has cover crops and plants. And in the middle of summer, and I haven't watered, if I dig around in the soil, the ground that has nothing in it is going to be dry as a bone. The row right next to each other, same sun exposure, that has roots in it is going to be moist. So I know people want to say, oh, more plants are going to take more water, but that's just, I mean, yeah, you have to water them, but they're going to hold the moisture in the soil. And that's why another reason to cover crop, and another reason to keep your soil covered at all times, either a living mulch or a mulch.
Well, down here in Santa Cruz, we have agriculture. It's in the news every night. What's happening with the agricultural industry? And this last storm we had, where they don't cover crop, they just had all their soil wash away. And the UN just recently did a report that our modern agricultural methods, it takes 6 pounds of soil to produce 1 pound of food. So that is not sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously.
That's heartbreaking, really.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. We are gonna leave you. We just have a couple more slides and we'll get to Q&A, but So Kathleen and I are not taking new clients. I'll just put that out there. But we're all going to save you guys $100 right now. Because what happens when we go out on consultations is what we find over and over again is if people have a mow and blow guy, or woman, the mow and blow person is blowing the soil and getting all the leaves and all the mulch off of the soil. We go with a soil knife. We can't even get our soil knife into the soil because it's like concrete. And so leave the leaves. They are called leaves for a reason. Leave the leaves. Don't have your mow and blow guy, or yourself for that matter, blow all your leaves off of your soil. Now, if they're on your driveway, or if they're on a hard surface, that's different. But keep that soil covered, keep those leaves where they are, keep the mulch. Oh, just another little tip for us is have a professional arborist prune your fruit trees. Kathleen's a ISA certified arborist. This is our favorite arborist right here, Kevin Raftery, who we just saw yesterday. Unless you really know what you're doing, and some people do. If you really are good at pruning, then prune your own trees. If not, then I would hire somebody. Cover your soil, no naked soil. Mythbusters. We don't pull weeds and we don't fertilize. Just only because everybody thinks. Oh, I always call February National Weeding Month, cutting off the top of your weeds if need be. I used to use vinegar. I really don't anymore. Kathleen, are you using vinegar?
Much less.
Yeah, but if you can, obviously try not to use chemicals. Vinegar, it's just, we either cut our weeds off at soil level, or we pull them from time to time. That's some of my group, and I think we are ready for Q&A. Cam, should I stop sharing, or should I go to the end of my let's get to Q&A in just 1 second. I want to thank Lyngso for having us, which is very nice. Thank you, Lyngso.
Thank you, Lyngso.
And I also want to mention the Spring Garden Market for Master Gardener and Educational Fair is Saturday, April 19th. And we sell tomatoes, peppers, summer squash, herbs. We sell a bunch of stuff there, and there's also talks, and it's at the San Mateo County Event Center. It's in Sequoia Hall this year, and that's at 2495 South Delaware Street in San Mateo County. And it's from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Some people do get there a little early and start lining up, but there's always plenty. So don't worry if you can't get there till 12 noon or something. There's always lots and lots of tomatoes and other great things. I think I'm going to stop sharing, Kathleen.
Okay.
And then maybe can give us the questions.
Okay, so we've got quite a few, and I go back and see if I can consolidate these questions here. Okay. Lots of questions about cover crops. So let me try to summarize. So after cutting and chopping cover crops, how long do you need to wait before planting? Do you need to wait for the chopped material to completely decompose?
No, you can plant immediately. The only thing tricky about cover cropping is if you plant a grass, if you don't wait until that seed head, you squeeze the seed head, and if it's milky and you chop it, it won't grow back. If it hasn't set a seed yet and become milky and you chop it, it'll grow back, which is not necessarily bad. It's just something that then you're going to have to keep chopping. But no, you just use what you chop and drop as a mulch. So you plant right into it.
Yeah, we do it simultaneously.
Okay, so follow-up questions regarding that. So if you chop weeds, won't they grow into more weeds like oxalics, Japanese knotweed, and other invasive weeds? Like, do you still chop and drop?
Yes, unless, Lisa and I disagree on this one. I pull oxalis And if I get the bulblet, I do the bulblet dance, which is kind of a little bulblet dance, but most of the time you don't. But it's the same is true of field bindweed. What you've done, even though you just cut it at soil level, is you've weakened the plant. And over time, which I mean years, you will get rid of it because there won't be enough energy for that plant to keep growing. Same thing with field bindweed.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the person's making a good point, but for instance, my cover crop, which usually has a grass in it, when you cut that grass, the grass is going to grow again. But I like that because it's pumping more carbon into my soil, and I chase carbon, I don't chase nitrogen.
Yeah, and grasses are really good at pumping exudates into the soil because they have really fibrous roots.
Yeah.
So it's actually really good for your soil to have grasses growing in it.
Yeah, I will just add on to that question. You know, if it's a weed and you know it's obnoxious or it's taking over, it's so invasive, and it's not field bindweed, then pull it. You know, I mean, again, we just don't want the perfect to get in the way of the good. And so I don't have any problem pulling weeds anymore. I just know the best practice is not to do that.
Yeah, but like mallow, pull the damn thing.
Yeah, exactly. Just don't pull field bindweed.
Okay. So this comment is, it's still not clear to me what is meant by cover crops.
Cover crop, the definition of cover crop is a plant you grow for your soil, not for yourself. So it can be anything. It can be a California native, it can be a grass, it can be a flower, but you're growing it for the exudate it's going to put into your soil. You're not going to harvest it.
And how you do it on a practical level is you can just go buy a seeding mix and it'll say cover crop, or you can go to Peaceful Valley, like groworganic.com, and they'll have a whole list of different cover crop seeds and different mixes that they sell. And it's how I cover crop is I just broadcast, and it's nice to do it before the rains. So this is a great time of year to cover crop, but I cover crop year round because I irrigate. I'm irrigating my rows. And so I'll cover crop in the middle of summer also, and I'll cover crop in fall. A lot of people think you can only cover crop in fall because you do it right before the rains come in, but you can cover crop year round. So it's just planting something, like Kathleen said, planting something to get your nutrient cycle going in your soil. So you're growing it for your soil. You're not going to eat it. And it could be, you know, you can grow radishes are a good cover crop because they do a lot of photoremediation. They take out bad stuff in the soil, and cover crop comes in different names. Some people call it cover crop. Some people call it green manure. Some people call it living mulch. So it goes by different names, but it's keeping those roots alive in the soil.
Okay, so that was the next question, is what is living mulch? Essentially cover crops.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any particular cover crops that you prefer?
Well, I prefer, I have two that I like, and these are nature seeds, but Larner seed also has a nice mix. And it's just, I like the California coastal mix. And in the orchards that I manage, they have a low growing California mix that doesn't get too tall. And some of it is perennials, which is fine in an orchard. Those are my two favorites. You can also go probably to Wegmans. I know San Lorenzo has it. It's called a soil builder. It's almost all legumes. Don't buy that. It's vetch, it's bell beans, it's favas, don't do that.
Yeah. I will say vetch, I used to cover crop with vetch, but I don't anymore because my whole property.
It's invasive.
Yeah, it's invasive. And so now I'm trying to get rid of vetch, and it's a pain in the neck.
And they actually now know, they used to think the only thing that brought nitrogen into your soil was a legume, but they now know there are free living bacteria in your soil that take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and convert it into plant available nitrogen. So you don't have to plant a legume to have nitrogen.
Okay. What was the tool name for cutting the cover crops down to the soil level?
Chop and drop.
Yeah, chop and drop, and you just use your hand pruners.
Or I use head shears.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, if it's a big long row, head shears are super easy, super fast. And you just go pop, 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 like that.
After planting, is cover crop good for covering the bare soil?
Yes.
Okay. What about dandelions? Don't they put nitrogen into the soil?
Yes.
Yeah, I think almost everything puts nitrogen into the soil, but dandelions are fine. I don't know if the question is, should they pull them or should they leave them? I mean, some people eat them, of course.
Yeah, I personally don't like dandelions. I also don't like stinging nettle. So when I see them and they're little, I just hula ho them. But you know, that's a personal choice.
Yeah, I will say, and this was surprising to me, but the last time we went to see Christine Jones talk, she said thistles are so good for your soil and they're really good for forming aggregates. And I mean, I don't like thistles in my rows because they hurt. You know, when you're planting out and you come across a thistle, it hurts. But if a thistle isn't in your way and you don't mind having it, it is very good for your soil.
Alrighty. So this question is, after planting my veggies, should I use cover crop seeds to cover the rest of the bed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say one of my clients is in raised beds and I intercropped cover crop between plantings of her cash crop, you know, the crop she wanted to eat. And I had to manage it pretty carefully. And I don't have a crew of 8 free workers. And the cover crop started to take over. So I ended up having to cut it down and then I just mulched. But I made sure there was something on top of the soil because you always want to cover your soil.
Yeah. So whether you do a cover crop / green manure / living mulch, if you're not going to cover crop, just make sure you're putting a little layer of hay or straw, either one, over your soil so you can keep that soil covered. What I've been doing, because well, I'm not going to say this is purely scientific, but from the soil level down, there's not really competition among the plants. To a microbe, a weed and a broccoli plant, they're all both giving off exudates. They're both keeping the soil alive. But soil level up, there can be competition for sunlight. So what I do is I go ahead and I put in my broccoli from a seedling, and I might seed the same time for my cover crop, but I know my broccoli is going to get about 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide. I'll put like a low growing cover crop in that instead of something that's going to be higher than my broccoli. You know, corn so tall, tomatoes get so tall. You know, sometimes you don't have to worry about how tall your cover crop's going to be because it's not going to interfere with the sun. But you just want to keep that in mind to do, you know, like 5 spot. Right now, all my 5 spot, which is a really pretty, it's a little California native. It only gets probably 2 inches tall and it has a pretty little flower on it. It's one of my favorite cover crops. I also love, Kathleen, buckwheat.
Yeah, especially rose colored.
Yeah, I mean, buckwheat's so pretty and it does have a little bit of a wimpy root system, but it's so easy to chop and drop. And You know, even California poppies, but there's, you know, you can just get cover crops in different heights. And so some of these grasses, some of the wheats and oats can get so tall and so vigorous. I wouldn't put them in with my broccoli
Or sunflowers.
or sunflower. I love sunflowers as a cover crop, but some of them get, 6 feet tall.
Okay, so this next question is regarding, I think Kathleen's comment about growing, you know, in a foggy area, probably in San Francisco perhaps, but the question is, near the ocean is also the same planting or planting calendar as elsewhere, or do you
Yes.
follow? Okay.
Yeah, I followed when I was living in San Francisco and down in Santa Cruz, and I'm in the foggy area of Santa Cruz. I follow the same chart, but you have to be more selective in the varieties you plant. Like, I can't plant a big beefsteak because it doesn't get hot enough. So the planting chart still applies, but you just have to get coastal varieties for summer. Not your winter and spring planting, not so much, but for your summer stuff, you need, especially tomatoes and peppers, you need to get coastal varieties that don't require the same heat units to ripen.
Okay, thank you. And then Doug Ptolemy's Nature's Best Hope, is that a recommended book? Was that
Oh
mentioned?
yeah, that's a
Okay.
great book.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, so the rest of, well, let me ask this question. Is it too late to plant broccoli now?
Nope,
No,
I'm
perfect
planting
time.
some next Tuesday because the stuff I planted last week got eaten by a critter. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're good.
I just looked at my chart, which is right next to me, and you can plant broccoli February, March, and April. So it's the perfect time to plant broccoli right now.
Okay, so the rest of the questions more so addressing like pests and infestations. So this person would love to hear more about managing pests, and they have a really bad slug infestation for brassicas and squirrels and rats. So they can only grow in enclosed areas. So I know you mentioned sluggos, and what about
Yeah.
squirrels and rats?
You know, I mean, you have IPM is always using, so integrated pest management uses like 5 different things to get at the same issue. And we've got rats and we've got bunnies, we've got squirrels. So the 4 things I've done is I got some feral cats from the SPCA in Burlingame, and that's new for us. So we're gonna see how it goes. We're feeding them, you know, they're all set up, but they are feral cats. In addition to that, we have an owl box that we just got donated to us, which is really nice. We're going to be putting up the owl box. And then I have a neighbor who has a bunch of rocks, and we're going to put a big pile of rocks to try to get some snakes to come into the garden. And then in addition to that, I'm covering the crops with 1/4-inch hardware cloth. And I think that's it. I think those are kind of like the 4 or 5 things I'm doing for.
Sluggo's pretty good for slugs on brassica. The only time I find sluggo doesn't work on slugs is when they've gotten up into your citrus tree. The only way to get them out is to hand pick them, or
Yeah.
get a little visual damage to your citrus. It's not that big a deal. But
And
when you do use when you do cover, make sure that it's secured to the ground well enough that the rats or bunnies or whoever can't get under it and into your garden.
yeah, that's a good point. We're using landscape staples to make sure that they can't get under the hardware cloth. Oh shoot, I was gonna say something now. I can't remember. Oh well.
So here's kind of an interesting question. What do you do with all the trapped squirrels and rats?
Bury them.
Yeah, you can bury them. I mean, some people, if we were in Australia, we would just put them into our compost pile. some people get a little grossed out by that. So, so-
Well,
so-
and the irony is you use a have a heart trap to catch them. And then I think by law, you have to kill them with
humane means,
humanely, and then you bury them.
yeah. So you can't, by California law, if you catch a furry animal, you cannot go and release it somewhere else. That's illegal. People do that all the time thinking they're doing a favor to the raccoon but you're not. That's actually a miserable way for them to die, because then they get attacked by the local group that's already there. But I do euthanize them. What you're supposed to do is put them in a CO2, like put them in a cooler, pump carbon monoxide into the cooler through the little spout where those coolers that have a drainage spout, and kill them that way. And then, I wouldn't put a rat really in my compost pile, but I'd put almost anything else in my compost pile. And that's how you're supposed to do it.
And then bury them deep enough that other wild animals won't come and dig them up.
Yeah.
I've also heard that you can, after they've passed away, you can leave them for your local turkey vultures to
Yeah,
harvest.
no, my brother had I think he had a deer that was killed on his property, and the turkey vultures all came and were feasting.
Yeah, just make sure you don't use poison. I think it's illegal in California now anyway, but you don't want to introduce that into the raptors. And so just make sure that you're trapping and not killing with poison.
Yeah.
Okay. Is wood chip good mulch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, I just read an interesting paper. I forwarded it to Lisa, that wood chips add nutrients to your soil and bark do not. Which, when I first read that, I was like, what? But if you think about it, why would a tree put energy into its bark that is just there to protect the important part of the tree? So bark doesn't have nutrients in it, but wood does. So you're still covering your soil if you use bark, and it won't decompose as quickly, but wood chips are way better, and you can get them for free from an arborist. Or by a chipper, which I just chipped this morning.
Oh, yay.
All righty. So you spoke of soil testing. How best should they approach testing their soil?
Well, if you I've used Western Labs before, but this last time I used actually who you guys use at Lyngso. And
Waypoint.
I used Waypoint, and I think they're in San Diego. But if you go to their website, they tell you how to do it, but make sure I have compost. I've been putting compost on for 17 years. So I had to dig down pretty far, probably 8 inches or so, to really get to soil, because I really wanted to test my soil. I didn't want to test my compost. And we have 2 fields where we garden. So I did a lower field and an upper field test. And you take it from like 8 different spots and kind of 8 different depths, and you put it in a bag and mix it all together, and try to, if you can, send it on a Monday instead of sending it like on a Friday. And then they do a good job, and they give you recommendation, and you mark off, I'm an organic gardener, or you mark off what you want your recommendations to be. Now, I don't pay attention to the recommendations because I'm not going to add anything. I know my system, and I know what I want to do. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't hugely over in something or hugely under in something. And it came back. I could add it to the presentation for next time, but it came back that we were in a really good band on just about everything.
All righty. Would the tips for soil and raised beds also apply to smaller pots and patio planters. Unfortunately, apartment gardening is quite limiting on access to natural ground space, so.
Yeah.
Hey,
Um,
that is a question for Lyngso.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that's a Terry or a Can question, because the information I have on raised beds is from Terry. And I didn't know how you really, really need to watch your carbon in raised beds and add a lot of carbon. I didn't know that till I talked to Terry. So Can, you can probably answer that question better than we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are different soil mixes for pots and patio planters. And obviously you're gonna have to apply a lot more nutrients in a contained area, whereas if it wasn't contained, you have free access to it. So you could still grow in the essential soil or the vegetable blend, but you will see sort of a shrinkage over time because as your watering pots kind of leach out a lot of sediment at the bottom, so it'll forever be sort of shrinking a little bit. So you just have to add on top over and over again. So yeah, you can apply similar principles, but you're not going to be doing cover crops and such. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I still do plant other stuff in with my potted plants. So I try to get the soil food web going as much as I can. But yeah, it's a contrived environment.
And when I was in San Francisco, my best sun was on my front porch. So I bought horse troughs down at Half Moon Bay Feed. I drilled holes in the bottom. I put them up on bricks so they didn't sit directly on my patio. And I actually had great success with, I think, your veggie blend. But every year I added then compost to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's actually a question regarding the planter bed question. Let me see here. Gosh, there's so many questions here, but oh well, we'll get back to that. Is it better to use drip lines with emitters every 6 or 12 inches or use specific 1/4-inch emitters for each plant?
I prefer the inline emitter 6-inch because then you're wetting the entire area. And this is true of all plants. If you use a solid line with an emitter, that's where your roots are all going to go because that's where the water is. But if you use a 6-inch inline emitter, you're wetting that entire area, so your roots are going to go all over the place, which is good. You want your roots all over the place.
Yeah, I like the inline emitters also, and I think it comes in 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch.
Yeah, an 8-inch, but yeah, I like the 6-inch, especially in vegetable beds.
Yeah, and then how many lines? If you have a 3x8 bed, which is a fairly common size bed, I think 4 lines is plenty. Do you do more than 4 lines, Kathleen?
Never. In fact, in Boulder Creek, most of mine, and she has 3 feet. I do 3 lines.
Okay.
Because I just find that's enough.
Yeah.
Okay. So since I know above ground isn't favored here in this discussion, I understand the temperament of the soil with wood planters per your explanation for the soil. However, what about the aluminum bins you see often to plant in? How is that different to work with for soil in planting?
Well, that's just what I was talking about was the horse troughs. You need to put drainage holes in the bottom, and you just get one of those, I don't know what they call them. I'm not a hardware person. One of those round drill bit things that makes holes, and put, enough holes and put it up so that the water doesn't just sit when it goes through those holes. But I mean, aluminum, it doesn't leach, it doesn't decay. I think they work great. And I used veggie blend, and I had really good luck with it.
Yeah.
And
The only thing I'll add to that is don't put rocks or sand in the bottom of it.
yeah,
If you're worried about the soil going through the holes that you drilled, you can just buy a drywall tape It's like a tape and it has, it's like a piece of fabric almost with, it's like a netting almost, but just dry. It's very inexpensive, and put that over your holes and that'll hold your soil in. But all you're doing so many people put, this is true of pots also, don't put rocks or sand at the bottom of pots. You want all that soil. You want the entire profile available to the roots. And you don't want to just, all you're doing is making your pot smaller by putting a bunch of stuff in the bottom of it.
And I didn't put anything and I never had a problem.
Yeah. Oh, you didn't even put the drywall tape in the bottom.
Nope. And a lot of people, I mean, if you have a gopher issue, it's a lot cheaper to get a horse trough. I mean, get the tallest one you can, but then, I mean, there's no way gophers are going to get in there, and it's pretty easy to control the other critters in a container like that.
Yeah. And they look cool too, I think.
Yeah. I did it.
Alrighty.
It's cool.
Thank you. So is now a good time for ground sowing for spring plants?
A good time for what? For spring plants?
To sow the seeds in the ground sowing for spring planting?
Well, yes, I mean, you can go ahead and do arugula now, you could do beets now, you could do bok choy, you could do Napa cabbage, carrots, chard, cilantro, collards, dill, fennel, kale, kohlrabi, lettuce.
Really? You direct sow kale, Lisa?
I do both. I direct sow kale and I plant out seedlings. But yeah, you can direct sow kale. You can't, broccoli and cauliflower, you cannot direct sow. You have to do it from seedlings.
Yeah. Lettuce, I direct sow lettuce all the time.
Yeah. And lettuce needs light. Most of those things that I just said do not need light to germinate. You want to bury the seed the same diameter as the seed. So if the seed is 1/16 of an inch, you want to bury it 1/16 of an inch. And get out a ruler and see how you want to barely bury
But
seed.
carrot seeds, you just want to sprinkle just a little bit of soil over your carrot seeds.
Yeah, a carrot's a teeny tiny seed. And lettuce, you don't want to put any soil on top. You're just going to put that, it's called photoblastic positive, but it has to have light. Everything in the aster family, which lettuce is, needs light to germinate. So don't bury that seed. Just go ahead and put it on top and then it'll germinate.
Or even better yet, with carrots, let one of them go to seed and just leave it alone. You'll have carrots forever.
It is true. And those carrots after a couple generations are like gnarly roots that you can't get your teeth through. But it's how our ancestors used to eat, is super, super fibrous roots, and it's what's best for your gut biome. So
Prebiotic.
yeah. So I let my carrots go to seed also, and I eat those gnarly carrots because I know I'm doing a good thing for my gut.
And they're beautiful. And
Yeah, they're pretty. And umbels, they bring in a lot of good insects.
All right. So you don't have to worry about last frost before sowing?
Last frost, oh, for sowing seeds? No, you wouldn't want to put your tender, all your summer stuff in until April, because you don't want it to get hit by frost. April 15th is my last frost date in Woodside and Portola Valley historically. I mean, every once in a while you'll get hit with a frost after April 15th. But all those seeds I just said, they actually do better. A frost doesn't hurt anything in the brassica family. It just makes it more yummy.
Alrighty. I'm gonna try to rush through these questions. There was so many. What about sanitizing your tools between plants? What do you do?
don't.
Yeah, I don't either. Now, if we're pruning a tree and the tree has, but it's different on a pruning cut with a tree, but I don't wash my tools between plant, like my soil knife.
My one caveat, if
Yeah.
I have a tomato and I know it has verticillium, and I actually take out the entire plant. and I
Uh-huh.
take out as much as the roots as I can. So I don't
Mhm.
really use tools for that, but if you wouldn't want to cut that off at soil level, you would want to pull that plant out. So,
You
I
put it,
don't sterilize my tools except when I'm pruning fruit trees that I know have an actively growing disease.
okay. Do you put that tomato plant in your compost pile?
No,
If
I put it in the green bin, which is why I don't buy organic green waste.
Or get it for free?
Because everybody puts their bad stuff in the green bin. They put the good stuff in their compost pile. They put the bad stuff in the green bin.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that's very true. Where did you get the cat clown collar?
Oh, they used to sell them on the Audubon Society webpage, but they stopped selling them there. And now I think the name of the website is Bird Be Safe, BirdBesafe. And but if you Google like cat clown collar, and I will say I have two cats, and one cat was getting a lot of birds, and then I put that clown collar. It was sad how many birds it was getting. So when I put the clown collar on, it went from getting a bunch of birds to like maybe one bird a year, which is still one bird a year too many, but it really works.
And they say that the bells don't work at all because the birds don't know what a bell means.
Yeah.
A lot of people put bells on their cats to keep the bird safe, and it's ineffective.
Yeah, the clown collar, how it works is it's very colorful. You do have to keep it clean, so every once in a while, I'll just take it off and then wash it and put it back on. Or I buy new ones maybe every year or two. And they have a little reflective band around it. And the cats do look a little bit ridiculous, but
Yeah, they look like clowns.
Yeah, that's the name. Okay, so the next one is, this person's garden is surrounded by redwoods, making it hard to get enough light, but they do get some light in the morning in the summers, and then sun goes behind the trees and comes back out in the early afternoon until about 5 p.m. So they might have about 6 hours of peak summer sun, but it's not consecutive. Are they doomed to never have a productive garden?
well, Kathleen and I might disagree on, just by the way, it does not need to be consecutive. So if you got 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, that still is 6 hours. But I will say it's going to be hard to have a productive garden. But you could do leafy greens, you could do root crops. It's probably going to be darn hard. You would never be able to do corn. Maybe you could do a cherry tomato.
And I would say I plant pretty densely in summer. I would not plant densely. I would plant further apart. I plant my tomatoes probably 3 to 4 feet apart. I would plant even further apart than that so that the plants weren't shading each other and that they could get as much sun as possible. And I agree with you, Lisa. I would do a smaller fruited because they don't require as much.
Yeah. Summer stuff's going to be a little tough, but you could do leafy greens and you could do root crops.
Or you could top your redwoods. Just kidding.
We don't. Okay, so this person, they have a raised bed and the soil level has dropped over the last few years. What should they use to build and raise soil level? And also, do you leave all the vegetable roots in the ground, including those big tomato roots for raised garden beds?
Unless your tomatoes had a disease, yes, leave the roots. If you haven't recharged that soil in several years, I would actually use diesel structured compost and then put a fairly decent layer of wood chips. What do you think, Lisa?
My understanding, I could be wrong on this, Cam, this is a question for you again, is that Lyngso now sells a a raised garden recharger. I mean, what's happened is your carbon has disappeared. The microbes have eaten up all your carbon, and why it's shrinking is because the carbon's now gone. The microbes ate it. So you need to add carbon back. So Lyngso, my understanding is there's now a mix you can buy at Lyngso that recharges your carbon.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Kathleen is right as well. So you want to use Diesel. And what we've done is for applications like this, where your garden bed has really shrunk, you don't want to just add compost. You want carbon matter in it as well. So the vegetable amendment mix is just that. It's Diesel with carbon. So it's perfect. So that's what you want to add. It's called the vegetable amendment mix. So if you want to top off your bed and it has shrunk a few inches, you just put that on top and amend it.
You guys are the best.
No, and that's really a great tip, because so many people grow and raise beds, which is totally great. But I can't tell you how many people are like, oh my God, like half my soil is gone. And then they do the wrong, then they put more soil on top, and they're making a big mess, and they're gonna get their fungal's gonna be all off. So I'm glad you guys did that. That was really smart.
No, yeah, I think it was a repetitive request from people because they were doing it on their own, which is what we recommend. It's like, oh, get this, and then you can top it off. And we're like, well, might as well mix it and just sell them.
Yeah.
So people don't have to do that.
That's smart.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is, what's the difference between hay and straw, and hay or straw better for mulching?
Hay
So-
hay has seeds, straw does not.
Yeah. So a lot of gardeners, oh, sorry, Kathleen.
Well, I was gonna say, if you mulch with straw, you won't get grass growing. If you mulch with hay, those seeds are gonna germinate and you're gonna get grass growing, which is not a bad thing if you know that's what you're doing. But if you don't want grass growing, say in your raised bed, like oats, then use straw. But hay's probably cheaper, and you can use alfalfa also.
Yeah. Alfalfa is another good mulch. And you could just cut it into little pieces.
Okay. Is the question of what is the tool that chops and drops? You've already addressed that. How should they approach soil tests? Soil test kits. Do you recommend any kits for soil testing?
No,
You know, yeah, probably not. You're probably not going to get the results you're after. And it is about $100 or so to get your soil tested. It might be 112 or something like that. And I've done it twice now. Oh, I did it a long time ago, so I guess I've done it 3 times altogether. I won't do a soil test probably for another, I don't know, 8 years or something, for a long time. So it's not something I would do every year. If you have a concern, or things aren't growing, if there's something going wrong, it's certainly, I think it's worth the money to get it tested. I just did it to kind of prove a point that you don't need inputs to have a healthy garden.
and if you're in an urban area and you might have lead contamination or some other toxin in your soil, I would definitely do a soil test. I wouldn't do an in kit. I would send it to an expert and have them look for toxins. And if they found them, then I would do a horse trough. I wouldn't grow in that soil because that lead will then be in your fruit.
That's a good point. Lisa, I know you said you've got to take off at 3. It is 3, and we do have
Oh.
several more questions, so I don't know if you want to stick around or.
Well, maybe we could wrap it up in the next few minutes.
Okay, yeah. So let me try to find, okay, what do you think about using eggshells in the garden?
You're doing it for your great grandchildren if you're going to do it at all.
Yeah.
So it takes a long time for eggshells to break down. And so you're not doing it for yourself. You might be doing it for the next generation or the generation after.
And the only reason you need to do it is if you're lacking calcium. And you can get calcium in your soil through cover cropping by correcting your pH, which is probably what the issue is. So it's not necessary. That's a Cynthia, what's her face, in the Santa Cruz Mountains, who has this whole tomato planting recipe with fish
like-
heads and eggshells and aspirin. And
So
you
Love
don't-
Apple Farms?
yeah, Love Apple. No, is it Love Apple? Yeah,
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 that's the name
I
of it.
think so.
yeah. She,
Yeah.
you know, whatever. You don't need it.
Yeah, I'll just say I mean, you don't need it, but you're also not hurting anything. I mean,
There are
would
no.
I do 100 eggshells in one area? No, but if you eat an egg a day and it's over a large area, and so it's 365 eggs over a year over a large area, and who cares?
Yeah, or put them in your compost pile.
Yeah, better with all that stuff. If you compost, it's always better to go into your compost pile.
Okay, last question, and then I think the rest we don't have to address, but do you mix compost into the soil or just on the top of the soil?
On
I
the,
put it on top. Go ahead, Kathleen.
on the top, one of the main principles of regenerative agriculture and kind of where we're moving is don't disturb your soil, because when you disturb your soil, you're putting oxygen into it, and that like supercharges all the microbes, and they get overactive and then they die. So if you just put it on top, they'll come up and find it and they'll pull it down into your soil for you. And I don't know if I've told you this, but I'm a super lazy gardener. So I just put stuff on top and I let the microbes do the work like they used to do 100 years ago before we started plowing and tilling. And okay, your turn.
All that being said, I do also just put mine on top, but and I've talked to Terry about this also. You know, if you want to work it in, if that just feels better to you, you can work it into the top inch or two, maybe 3 inches. But if you do want to work it in, it's just to the very, very top of the soil. You don't want to dig it in, because that's when you're disturbing your soil, and you don't want to disturb your soil.
All right, well, thank you. I don't want to keep you both past the class time here, but thank you so much. And thanks for the audience as well. Any closing remarks from either of you?
Just thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And you will have nutrient dense food if you grow it yourself.
Good point.
All righty, thank you, everybody. Thanks to you both.
Thank you. Bye.
You know?